That out of the way. There we go. All right, so welcome all. We wanted to do this. This is the first of several trainings that we're going to do here in the spring. Let's see, what was that? Somebody. Okay, can folks hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. All right, just had a note there from Teresa. Teresa, can you hear me now? Yes? Okay, great. All right. Good deal. All right. So we're going to get going here. We're going to go through what so we're going to have several trainings. We'll send out announcements for the next two, but we wanted to have this time for you all to ask your questions that you may have about staff parish relations work. The other two that we'll be doing, one will be around trustee and finance kind of stuff, and then one talking specifically with lay leaders and ad council chairs or church council chairs. We'll get those announcements out to everybody as well. And we'll do those in the next couple of months. Tonight, though, we're going to look at staff parish relations committees, and the invitation I sent out to everybody had a link so you could go to Cokesbury and pick up the guidelines booklet there. If your church doesn't already have one of those, it's a great tool that you can use. The denomination puts it out every 4 years. This one is a little long in the tooth because we haven't had a general conference in several years, and they usually wait for a general conference to happen with anything new that might be in the book of discipline related to your committee, but we haven't had one of those. So the guidelines booklet that's available right now is the one that they put out actually 8 years ago after the 2016 general conference. And so that's what we're still working with until we get a new one, hopefully in the next year or so. So we'll get started. So I am the district superintendent for the Eastern South Central Colorado district, which is all of the Eastern Plains of Colorado, and then over through Colorado Springs and Pueblo into the San Luis Valley. So we have about 54 churches in our district, and we have several staff people. I am one. We have another one with us here, Travis Walker. I'll let you introduce yourself here in a second. And our third one is Leslie Chamberlain, who's our district administrator, who's located in Brush. Travis, why don't you say a little bit about who you are as the Congregational Resource Minister?
Yes, it's good to be with you all tonight. I'm Travis Walker. I am the new, as of this year, Congregational Resource Minister for the Eastern South Central Colorado District, the Mountain Sky Conference of the United Methodist Church. I gotta find a shorter way to say that right there. I'll put all those words together. But in this position, I'm just mostly here to help, to be with you all, to help find new ways of reaching out into communities and supporting your congregations. My other hat that I wear is that I am the pastor of the Wiley United Methodist Church in Wiley, Colorado, down in the southeast corner of our state of Colorado. And I've been here I'm in my 7th year here at Wiley. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Great. All right. Thanks, Travis. Yeah, and as our Congregational Resource Minister, Travis is available to go around and do trainings. And if you ever want to have your SPRC committee do some work there locally, you can get in touch with us, and it may be Travis who meets with you by Zoom or maybe in person. So, all right, let's just jump on in here. So staff parish relations, well, we need to say a prayer first. We should do that. So let's start with a prayer. Oh, gracious God, we are so grateful for this day and for all of the folks who are gathered on this screen tonight. We are grateful for them, for their churches, for their committees. And we pray that you would help us to sense your spirit with us tonight as we talk about this important work in the life of each of our local churches and of our annual conference and of our district. We pray that you would bless this time. It's in your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, thank you. Uh, okay, so we have a couple of tools that we're going to use a little bit here tonight, but one of Travis's colleagues, our CRM up in Montana, put together a PowerPoint. We may use some of those slides this evening in the course of our work here, but we're just going to kick it off with what we're about. First off, you all know the mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples for the transformation of the world, right? And you all, as our SPRC folks, it's one of your, you are some of the folks who are most integrally involved in making that happen. Because you are the folks who, and we'll talk about the list of things that the SPRC does, which is long. You are some of the folks who pay close attention to how it is that we are making that mission happen. So I want to thank you, first of all, for the work that you do. It is essential to the life of your local church, and you are in relationship with me as a superintendent, with our bishop, as we talk about what's going on in your relationship with the annual conference and the leadership of your church, and especially the appointed or assigned leadership of your church. But also there locally, you are the middle people between your congregation and your staff and your pastoral leadership. And there are few relationships in our churches that are more important to sustaining the communal life of your congregation. So I'm grateful for who you are and what you're doing in your local church. If you get that guidelines book, or if you have a book of discipline, which is maybe more likely or less likely, one of the first things, there are 5 pages that describe what the Staff Parish Relations Committee responsibilities are in our book of discipline. But the very first thing that it talks about is how important it is that you and the people on the Staff Parish Relations Committee maintain the character and habits of followers of Jesus Christ. It is really easy for your committee or any committee in the life of the church to get sidetracked and just do the administrative work of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. But core to what you're doing is paying attention not just to the administration, to the forms that need to get filled out and the reports that need to get made, and that kind of thing. It is to pay close attention to the spiritual life of your pastor, of your church, of your congregation. And in order to do that, the folks on your committee need to spend significant time on your own spiritual journeys. And so I hope one of the things that you all do as a team when you get together is to pay attention to that and what it is, the practices that you all are participating in to maintain your relationship with God. Because oftentimes the work that you do in this committee is so relational, right? It is not just technical stuff that you do. It is relational. It has to do with dealing with conflict when conflict comes up. It has to do with support and encouragement. Sometimes it has to do with hard conversations about what's working and what's not working. And the core to that is that we relate to one another as Jesus followers, as people who have love and grace at the heart of what we do. And so that we can't highlight that enough in terms of how important that is to the work that you're going to do, even as we start talking about calendars and lists of responsibilities this evening. That has to be at the heart and at the root of what you are doing as the Staff Parish Relations Committee in your church. So I appreciate that hard work that we're asking you to do. All right, now I'm going to try. Let's see if I can make this happen. Well, I'm just going to I'm going to share the screen, so hopefully you all can. There's going to be some small print. We're going to be able to probably put together something that we can send out to folks later on, but want to be able to show you some stuff now. Okay. I can't figure out how to make it. Okay. There we go. How do I make this go bigger? I don't know that I do. Oh, well, all right. So you can see, hopefully, what's the SPRC supposed to do? So the official line, and this is what's there in the Book of Discipline, United Methodist congregations give the Staff Parish Relations Committee the responsibility for administering the relationship between staff, congregation, and the district superintendent so that the mission of the church moves forward. Now, here's where the small print really happens. Travis, if you've got a, wait, I wonder if this is, hey.
Chris, click slideshow. There you go.
I just found it. There we go. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Of course, now I've got to get to the right. Oh boy. Okay, sorry. I get through all that. Skipped that. There we go. All right. That didn't sound so bad. So here's the long list. Here we go. So we're just going to run through these real quick. And if Travis, keep an eye out if oh, it's going all the way through. That's not helpful. Need it to stop. Okay. I'm going to do that then. Sorry, everybody. We'll get there. Don't want to do that. Oh, good heavens. There we go. All right. Okay, so this is the list that's in that guidelines book. So the first item, I'm going to go ahead and share this again in case you do have a screen large enough. Let's see. All right. Encourage, strengthen, nurture, support, and respect the pastor and staff and their families, including advocating for a healthy work-life balance. So this is one reason we call it the SPRC these days rather than the PPRC. Some of you, like me, grew up in a church where we had a pastor parish relations committee. We call it a staff parish relations committee, and this can vary from church to church, from smaller churches to larger churches, as well as to how exactly you handle staff. But you are looking out for your pastor as staff, but also for your secretary or office administrator or your musicians, people that you pay in the life of your church, and sometimes even volunteers who work in staff-like positions. We promote unity in the churches. So you're that middle person to help foster communication within the life of your church. We confer with the staff on the effectiveness of ministry and impediments to effectiveness, including conflict of interest and sexual misconduct. We'll talk about that briefly this evening. Your responsibility for paying attention to those touchy subjects. Conferring with the staff about the effective use of their gifts, skills, time, and priorities. We'll talk about the assessments and the evaluations that happen over the course of a year. Teach the congregation about itineracy, steps into ordained ministry, the value of diversity in staffing, and the ministerial education fund. So you are the starting place if there are folks in your church who feel called to ministry in whatever mode, whether as a certified lay minister, as a licensed local pastor, as an ordained person. You are the starting place in your local church for that process. You work on what the job descriptions are for your staff, writing job descriptions. You talk with all your staff about continuing education and spiritual formation, about making sure that they too are paying attention to those things just as you are. You confer with the district superintendent about the clergy leadership for the congregation. We'll talk some about the appointment process this evening. The SPRC recommends staff positions to the church council if there are duties that you see in the life of the church or that the church needs to put together. You are going to be the team that helps put together those job descriptions and figure out what roles are needed. You are going to help create the written personnel policies and sexual misconduct policies for the congregation. Not all of our congregations have those things, and so those are things you may want to pay more attention to in your church. You're going to consult on matters of staff support, including housing, vacation, insurance, pension, and other matters that are outlined in the discipline. We may take a moment and we'll look at the compensation form as part of your role, and especially leading up to church conferences in the fall. So that's the short list. You can take a look at the Book of Discipline and read those 5 pages if you like, but you may not want to do that. So, all right. Now, I'm going to, this is interesting. So oftentimes we get the question from churches about who should be on the SPRC committee. And so we're going to run through real quick the things that are required of members of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. This is all from the discipline. So the committee should have 5 to 9 professing church members who have to be lay people. Now, this may look different for those of you who have a single board governance model that you've adopted in your church, right? So in that case, it's going to look, you've done the work to look at how that functions in your single board and the way that you have set that up to get the duties of the SPRC accomplished. It should be a diverse group that represents each constituency or group in your church family. It also includes, on top of those 5 to 9 church members, any lay leaders or lay members of the annual conference in your church. So if you have a lay leader, if you have another person who is lay member to annual conference, those folks should be invited to be a part of this team as well. Now, there are some restrictions and things that some folks who should not be a part of the SPRC. So any employees of the church should not be part of SPRC. Any members of the pastor's family should not be in the SPRC. Any family members of staff should not be. There should not, every local church, especially, well, no, it could be extension ministers or retired clergy who are affiliated with your local church, who turn in a report every year through your local church, but they don't actually serve in your church. They may serve in another organization or agency, or they're retired. They cannot be on the Staff Parish Relations Committee. It is all lay people on the SPRC. And then this one's, especially in our smaller churches, sometimes this can happen. No one who shares a home with another member of the Staff Parish Relations Committee. So only one person from an immediate family who reside in the same household can serve on this committee. So those are some basic guidelines. Any questions about any of that so far? And I can't see you, so go ahead and just speak up. All right. Next thing we'll look at is when you gather as a committee, and the committee is supposed to meet at least quarterly, so at least 4 times over the course of the year. And you can have additional meetings of the SPRC. Oftentimes SPRCs meet every month or every 2 months, and that's great to keep communication flowing. A meeting could also be called by the bishop or the DS or by the pastor, or by the chairperson of the committee. So you could have specially called meetings of the SPRC. One really important thing to note is that you cannot have a meeting of the SPRC without the pastor or the district superintendent present, unless there's a special permission granted by either the pastor or the DS. That's really important to keep that communication flowing, and that's often one that an SPRC would like to have kind of an executive session without the pastor there, but that's not the way we work. Everybody needs to be involved unless there's some sort of a special reason that you get permission for that meeting. All right. And that's on this slide. So committee can't meet without the knowledge of the pastor or the DS. Make sure that you prepare for your meetings. The chairperson should have an agenda ready for every meeting. Everybody needs to make a real effort to be there. You can't do the good work that you need to do without everybody present. And you want to try to do all you can to promote positive relationships among staff and congregation, communicating with attentiveness to confidential issues. Confidentiality is an important thing in the life of your committee. There are going to be a lot of, we don't like to use the word personnel committee necessarily because there's more involved in what you do than just being the personnel committee for your church. But there are going to be a lot of conversations that are related to what a secular organization might have in their human resources or personnel work. And those are things that need to be held confidential between the pastor and the Staff Parish Relations Committee. And that's really to look out for the well-being of the pastor and the staff of the church, and to make sure that everybody can trust that they can share sensitive things within your team. So oftentimes I find it helpful if you're talking about confidential things that are sensitive, for the team before you disperse from a meeting where you're talking about those things that you think folks are going to be asking about, help each other out and come up with a response that you can give to people who ask questions about sensitive matters. Oftentimes a response like that might include or involve having a general statement. So you're not going to talk in specific terms about what is happening with a pastor or a particular staff person, but you might have a particular statement you can make about your guidelines or policies that you use in making particular decisions, and keep it general so that you're giving some information about how you function, but not necessarily specifics about a particular situation that you're dealing with. All right, that handles all of that. Okay, there we go. That's my introduction to how we're going today. So what questions might you have right now? It's great to see everybody. All right. Well, like I said, so I'm going to try to keep track of the chat while Travis is talking, and he'll try to keep track of it while I'm talking. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat as well, and we'll get to them.
I think the folks at Salida have a.
I was just about. I thought I saw the square light up. So Salida, what you got?
Oh, go ahead. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, you said that either the district superintendent or the pastor had to be at every meeting. That includes when we're coming up with the evaluation procedure for the staff and the pastor?
Okay, that's one of those exceptions, right? So you all, and the reason, when we send out the evaluations, and that happens, is that first or second quarter? This first quarter we send it to. Trying to figure out which one of us was going to be talking about that. You may have a session where the pastor steps out of the room where you're talking about that assessment tool that we send you every year, but that is only because the pastor will step back into the room and you will discuss that assessment tool with them. So you want to be able to be frank with each other around that, especially around that document, but you're not going to say anything in that document that you haven't discussed with the pastor, so they know where it's coming from. Okay. So that's really important.
Thank you.
And they're filling out their own. So when I was in a church, we would set that meeting, and I would go into another room and work on mine, and they would work on theirs, and we would come back together. So it'd be a couple hours we'd spend on that evening. We might take an hour, 30 minutes, or an hour separate and then come back together and share what we put down there. That's just one way that I've done that in my churches. So, all right. Any other questions? We'll jump over to Travis and let him take us the next step along the way. Travis?
All righty. Well, I think what we're going to do from here in this part of our training is we're going to go quarter by quarter, starting at the beginning of the calendar year in January and go through our things that some of the things got touched on already, but just kind of a helpful order of operations as you go through the year. I do want to give one caveat before I go any further. I have been gone for the last 3 days, helping with a confirmation retreat up at the John Wesley Ranch in Colorado Springs. And my cats are excited to see me. So if you see a cat flying through the air, I am aware of the flying cat in that there. But anyway, the first quarter is a really good time to have, I like to call it kind of the organizing meeting. And do it early as you can in the first of the year. January is a good time. And in that organizing meeting, it's good to recall the importance of kind of your norms of how you meet as a group. Even if you've got a good practice of meeting, a good structures of how you meet, when you meet, it's good to review that just as a checklist and just to refresh everybody's memory. And this is also really good at this organizing meeting as you're bringing folks on board. If they're new to the committee, they're getting to hear this too. So everybody's on that same page going into the new calendar year. And at this organizing meeting, I recommend, reviewing the importance of confidentiality, of just, reiterating that. And especially it's good for new folks to hear that, understand that. And it's a good time to ask questions about that as well. What does that mean? What does it look like, to clarify any questions? Also, it's a good time and that organizing meeting to set meeting dates for the year. I don't know about you all, but even if I have a date on the calendar and something comes up that date doesn't work and we have to adjust that planned date, at least it was on the calendar. So it's going to happen. That's just good committee hygiene. Have dates on the calendar when you'd like to meet, or set up an order of when you would like to meet. Maybe it's the second Wednesday of the month you like to meet, or maybe it's the second Wednesday in even numbered months. Whatever works for you all for meeting. And I think also it's really helpful in our day and age is how you're going to communicate when you're not in the meeting. So what I mean by that is, are meeting reminders going to be sent by text? Are they going to be sent by email? Is a person on the committee going to make phone calls? Is it church newsletter? Just so if things come up in between meeting times, there's a good way to get a quick note of, say, hey, we're going to get together Tuesday night to touch base on something real quick. How do you get that information out? And again, that way everybody's on the same page. There's a few other things, though, as you're looking ahead for the year. That first organizing meeting or the first quarter is good to look at, is simply looking at it and establishing what expectations are helpful for staff. What is it important for staff members to do? And this is going to look different in every church. And as you'll gather, a common theme throughout our conversation this evening is adapt it for your setting. It's going to look different if your congregation worships 15 on a Sunday, or if you worship 1,000 on a Sunday. It's just going to look different on how this works. But these are just general guidelines. Establish expectations for staff. Who's going to be doing what? If you have multiple staff, multiple pastors on staff, this is a good way to maybe help look at the workload of the church. What needs to be done, have that assigned, and so forth. If you have folks who are not like pastoral, then maybe you have a janitor on staff, or maybe you employ church musicians. Just reviewing that, establishing that, what you'd like, or would be helpful for the ministry of the church in those positions. Also, establish relationships with your congregational leaders. And what I mean by that is, if your congregation has multiple committees, you're not on a single board governance, It's going to look different for single board governance. If you're not on single board governance and you have a trustees committee, you have a finance committee, who on SPRC is going to relate to those committees? Because the work of the SPRC touches so many different areas of the church. It's helpful to have a person on SPRC who is on finance. It's helpful to have one who's on SPRC to relate to trustees and so on and so forth. If you're single board governance, what's really good there is you just have a point person for those things that kind of touch from SPRC, kind of name, who on the one board governance is going to work with parsonage issues, if you have a parsonage and so forth, who's going to be working on the finance side, especially who's going to help with make sure benefits are paid and so forth, just to review that as well. Also, if you have any affiliated clergy with your church, it's good to refresh and renew those connections. Affiliated clergy is a broad category of people here, but it includes if you have deacons in your community, who maybe work outside of the local church. Maybe you have a deacon in your community who works with social services, or a deacon who works with the schools. Just maybe assign a person on the committee who's going to check in on that person. What support do they need in their ministry? Certainly, they're not appointed to your local church, but we're a connectional church and we support ministries, in so many different places. Just to check on them, how we can support, and so on. Also, if you have any retired clergy, maybe assign a person on the committee who's just going to touch base with them. Especially as if there's any needs they have that come up, or if they're a person who is a regular pulpit supply for your pastor when they're away, just have a person who checks in on them, touches base, relates to them in regards to SPRC. It's good to review that as well. And also, with all that, looking at staff and so on, how are you going to support folks, your staff at your church? What ways are you going to be supporting them? Again, this looks different for every church. I'll give a good example here I've thought of recently is in my Wiley church, we have a paid pianist, for example. And she is so wonderful. I mean, it's so super flexible, will show up, for funerals to help out. And she's not compensated, a huge amount, but maybe she's looking for, our pianist is looking for some new music. Maybe SPRC can help, maybe get a subscription to a music service, maybe support, give her some time to go look for music elsewhere, wherever it might be, and so on and so forth. How are you supporting your staff, and what was helpful for them in their work and their ministry? Other thing that's important too is to identify new leaders. This is actually something that's really exciting, I think, with SPRC, that because we have so many important things to do on SPRC, we overlook this, but it's so exciting and amazing. Is SPRC is a committee that gets to identify rising and growing leaders in the church. Who in the church is being called to a new ministry? Who is, showing gifts and graces in ministry that could benefit the church? Who has, maybe a developing call to preach? Who has a developing call to minister to those who are in the nursing home? SPRC can help identify those folks. And when people are answering a call to licensed ordained ministry, it's SPRC is kind of one of the first points that person begins to work on that call. There's actually a part of the candidacy process for pastors where the local church SPRC endorses and supports the candidate. So I would, that's something, unfortunately gets overlooked. It's so exciting, but so important for the life of the church. I like how Chris just says there in the chat, having fostering a culture of call in your church of ministry. That's a better way to put it, in how I kind of ramble through it there. Those are some few things in the first quarter it's good to look at. And if there's one thing I could share in the first quarter at some point to touch base on that makes all of this work, is to have that communication plan in place. How are you going to communicate across these areas? How are you going to communicate with folks? How are you going to communicate with a congregation? Again, it looks different for every church, but raising that question that can help you examine and grow in your work as SPRC. So real quick, that's the first quarter of work that you can take a look at as SPRC. Chris, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, well, I'd like to add something to that. You
Sure.
talked about support of staff, and this is a great time of year for you to have a conversation with your staff. Travis gave a great example with the accompanist, but with your pastor, one of the things that we've been noticing has been getting worse. I'll just put it that way. In the life of our churches, is our pastors are experiencing this job, this vocation, this role as more stressful today than it has been ever before. And so for you as the staff parish relations team in your church to really pay attention to the well-being of your clergy, make sure that they are taking their days off every week. Make sure that they are getting a Sabbath, and they're getting it. Ideally, they have 2 days. One day that they treat as their Sabbath, since your Sabbath is their work day. Figure out what their Sabbath is and what their day off is, then that they get to do all the things that all of us need to do: mow the lawn, clean the house, go shopping, do the things that they need to do in their life. So being really intentional about that, because just like you all, your pastor can be a workaholic and spend all 7 days of the week doing work. We know that your pastors are on call 24/7 all the time anyway, and so they get those calls on those times when they're trying to take time off. But if you can help them figure out how to do that, how can you make sure that they take their vacation every year? In the Book of Discipline, full-time pastors get 4 weeks of vacation every year. And so making sure they're taking that time. In addition to that, they get a week for continuing education time. Make sure that they are doing that every year. They're supposed to fill out a continuing education and spiritual formation report every year. Make sure you're asking them. This is a great time of year to ask, what books have you been reading? What training event do you plan to go to, either online or in person this year? What are the things that you're doing to grow your skills? This is after you all have had time to do those assessments every year. Figure out, those growing edges for your pastors and staff. Maybe that your office administrator or secretary could use an online class in Excel spreadsheets or in word processing. Who knows what kind of training might be useful there, and there are ways to get them training as well. So think about the ways that you can support that. We'll talk about the compensation form a little bit as another tool you can use. Does anybody have any questions about that first quarter? All right, very good. Be sure and use that chat too. All right, we'll jump into the second quarter now then. This is really time for a lot of checking in. All right, and I'll put this in parentheses. This is the time of year when appointments are happening in the first quarter and the second quarter. We're going to talk about appointments specifically in a little bit, so we'll put a pin in that and come back to it. So this quarter, you're going to be doing a lot of checking in on things. This is when we send out the Clergy and Staff Parish Relations Committee assessment documents. Those should be coming out very soon to you. Pastor fills one out. All of your clergy fill that out, and then the Staff Parish Relations fills one out as well. This is when that happens, and they're going to be due this year, second week in May. We're going to get them out to you sooner than we've gotten them out to you the last couple of years, so you'll still have a few months to work on them. So you're going to want to do that in this quarter. This is also a great time for you to look at kind of some of the technical aspects of supervising staff as the SPRC. So making sure that you're complying with hiring laws and wage laws related to your staff. Do some assessments of what you're paying your folks. What are other churches in the community paying their office folks or their accompanists or those kind of things, youth directors, those other positions. Make sure that you are paying justly for the work that your people are doing for your church, so that you're not lowballing them or just getting the most out of them for the least amount of money. Make sure that you're paying attention to fair wages. What's coming out the first amendment? So Teresa, the clergy assessment forms are going to be coming out in the next week or so, and those are due in May this year. All right, so paying attention to workers' comp. This is, if you're in our church mutual plan, this is part of what we do through Church Mutual, is the workers' compensation stuff, and it's usually a very small slice of what you're paying into your insurance policy, but really important for the staff that you have in your church. Paying attention to laws related to taxes for your employees and your pastors, and how that impacts them. Most of you are aware that your clergy, your church doesn't pay the Social Security taxes for your clergy; they pay it themselves. So paying attention to what that means for them, and the ways that you as a church might be able to help them, given the differences that they have in their tax requirements. All right. Okay, so here's another list of things that you may want to. I'm going to put this up so you can see the list. I think you can read it. Here's a list that you can look at. Things that you want to look at related to your personnel policies. So, how you do hiring. Are there any standards that you keep for that? Do you post all of your positions publicly in some way? Do you have any requirements for that in your local setting? Compensation. You want to look at the compensation of your staff, like I said. One of the things that our churches are usually really not very good at is paying attention to benefits. And is there anything in addition to the hourly wage or the salary for your staff that you could provide as a benefit? That could be anywhere from very small things to 401k plans or any number of health insurance, all those things that could be a part of the compensation you provide for your staff. Supervision. How do you go about supervision? What does a staff person do if they have a complaint, if they have a problem? Who do they go to? Make sure that they know what the policies and procedures are in your church related to that. Rules and regulations. Those are things that come up. One of the recommendations I make to churches that don't have a personnel handbook, for example, is that you start simply. You might look up there, or you can Google it and get yourself a basic document that you can start with. But then you just go year by year, and this is the time of year when you check your policies, and something comes up that you think needs to be a part of it, you add it in there and get it approved by your church council, and there you go. And so it's a living document that you edit as you go. Safe sanctuary is really super important. Any church that has any kids in your church, but not just kids, safe sanctuaries has to do with how we relate to each other as adults as well. But it's for our kids in particular. We want to make sure our churches are a safe environment for folks who are vulnerable, right? And so we want to make sure we do that. At the conference level, if you want to call somebody and get on track, Amanda Daniel is our conference staff person who has this under her portfolio. And so she is our conference staff person for young people and camping ministries. And she would be more than glad to help you get connected with safe sanctuary stuff. Policies for preventing sexual misconduct. You may think this would never happen in your church, but those are the famous last words of every church that has had a sexual misconduct situation arise. And so you want to make sure, and your team is the one that really needs to know what this entails. What is sexual harassment? What is sexual abuse? What is sexual assault? You all need to know that, so that when someone raises it, you can say, yep, that's an important thing for us to address and to deal with. I will just say, as a aside to this, when situations arise in your church where there is a legal question, sometimes churches have attorneys in the local church that can help address these things. If you don't, or if you're not sure how to deal with this, we have a conference chancellor. We just hired a new one in the last couple of months. If you contact me, if I can authorize 2 free hours of legal consultation for your church. And often it has to do with something like this, where there's been some sort of inappropriate contact of some kind. And so these are the kind of situations we want to be able to help you with when they come up. Internet policies. In this day and age, we need to answer those questions when they arise as well. What does that look like in your church? Anywhere from the Wi-Fi that you provide in your church, having good policies for that, to social media and how your church is represented there. Thinking through this with your pastor. Oftentimes, our pastors have a social media presence, and for you all to make sure that you have an understanding with your pastor about what is helpful and what is not in that presence. Those are helpful, and for them to be able to express to you what their understandings are. Right. Get out of there now. All right, so yeah, for those personnel policies, make it as simple as possible. You don't need to get complex unless you have a complex system. In our district, we have everywhere from very simple systems to very complex systems. So it needs to be as simple as your system can stand. Make it easy to read and understand. Make sure that if you have any questions about what's legal or not, that you do consult with an attorney. So. All right, so in this quarter of checking in, this is another time for you to check in with your staff and your pastor, and take some time to talk about what the work environment is around your church. Does everybody have the tools that they need to do their jobs? Ask your pastor, ask your office person, your musicians, your custodians. Make sure everybody has what they need, and this is a great time to clarify who on your team relate to each of your staff people. You should have somebody checking in quarterly with all of your staff to see how they're doing. How's your office person doing? Any issues that are arising? Checking with your musicians to make sure the piano's in tune and all the things that they may have on their plate. Your custodian, do they have the supplies? Do they have is the process in place for them to get what they need? Do they feel supported in that way? Those are all things that you can do with your staff. All right. I think that is enough for this quarter for now. Anybody have any questions or anything? Not right now. Okay, good. Be sure and jot those down or put them in the chat. So Travis, we'll turn it over to you to look at the third quarter.
All right. Third quarter blasting through the year is now July, and it's a good time to take a look at some job descriptions. What are some general job descriptions for positions in your church, around that the SPRC, would evaluate or review or hire? Maybe this would be for your janitors, your musicians, youth directors, your pastors, just to look at those descriptions. I'm going to share an example that I ran across just recently in my work outside of the church, but I'm a part of the Wiley School, the Accountability Committee. And the school board asked for some help. They had a longtime school administrator retire and looking for a new one, and they just wanted some extra eyes looking at the job description. And in the job description for this particular position, it included a line of having a person who was up to date on the latest classroom technology, including adding machines and typewriters in that there. So it'd been a little while since there had been a little bit of a review of that particular position. So, it helps kind of keep those fresh, keep those things on, up to date, current. It's not that you're looking at doing a total staff changeover, but it's just another way to review, to look at things, and you have things, just ready to go in case you need them. And tied into that, as you're looking at those job descriptions, also clarifying who reports to who. This is really important if you have more staff members at your church, especially program areas, youth directors. Who does a youth director report to? Who supervises them? That's an example right there. So to kind of clarify that as you're looking at job descriptions. Another important thing that comes up in this quarter that will be helpful as you get ready for church conference season and for church budgeting practices, or church budgeting for the upcoming year, is to look at those salaries and benefits, to look at those packages, what the cost is, if there's any coming updates, because this will be in the third quarter following annual conference, especially around clergy. There's a document that's produced or approved every year. It's the minimum compensation. And so you'll have a copy of that petition you could look at if there's any changes to that. Usually we'll have the minimum comp for the upcoming year in there, and also I guess that'd really be the only big change, in that document right there. But it's helpful to have if that's helpful for your church to have those numbers and to start planning as well. And this is where, if you are not on a single board governance, or if you have multiple committees in your church, multiple resource committees such as finance trustees, especially with finance, that finance committee and SPRC are talking to each other right there, that your contact is in communication, with both groups, information's being exchanged well. If you're on a single board governance, this is good to look at that as you're getting ready for your budgeting process, to have that in mind, and to be in consultation with your clergy person as well on that. Kind of tied into that in a way, but this is also a good time to review continuing education and spiritual formation for your clergy. And I would also include, for your whole staff as well, not just clergy in this, but know what continuing education opportunities are coming up that might be helpful for your clergy or your staff to either participate in, or spiritual formation, especially spiritual formation, just because that can kind of get missed in the everyday life of ministry. It seems so weird that we would miss that in our work, because we do spiritual work, but it can get missed in there. And I'm probably speaking more of my own experience right there in that than actual what happens in churches usually right there. So I'm holding myself accountable as I'm saying this out loud with you all. But this is a good time, especially if you're looking at budgeting for the next year, if there's any cost with continuing education. What's amazing now, though, in 2024 and going forward, is a lot of continuing education is available online. And many things, the cost is lower because it's online, like a webinar, or maybe a class that's taught online. The cost can be a little lower, so it increases accessibility for opportunity. If you do need some assistance with funding, there is a fund. It's called the Ministerial Education Fund that our annual conference has that provides an annual grant for clergy to attend events. And Chris and I were just talking about this recently for an opportunity for me and my congregational resource work and with Wiley. It's $750 a year that's available to help offset costs. So I highly encourage the use of that. And then, as the congregational resource minister, I'll extend this to you. One of my areas of focus has been with grants. And so there are many foundations, organizations that provide capacity building grants. And to translate that language into the language of the church, this would be continuing education or spiritual formation grants. So if you have questions about that, definitely reach out to me on this right here. And I'd be happy to look at grants, maybe local foundations in your area or statewide that would be of assistance for clergy, continuing education, or also other staff as well, for your youth director, for your musicians, for your business administrators, anyone you have, if you want to provide an opportunity for them to grow and their skill set to grow in their ministry, reach out to me and I'd be happy to help find funding for it. I love finding money for people. So anyway, that's a few things in the third quarter. So I'll hand it over to you, Chris, for the fourth.
All right. Well, I'm actually going to dwell on the third for a second here, just to talk,
you go right ahead.
through. Since you open the conversation about compensation, this is the quarter where you're going to be talking about that. I just want to reemphasize this is one you want to be talking about it within your SPRC, and then also with your finance folks and the folks who make money decisions in the church, right? So I'm going to talk through real quick, and then I'm going to show it to you. Well, I'll go ahead and show it to you since we're in little windows here. The compensation form. Many of you have seen this before. I want to talk through it with you quickly, just to highlight some of the things and how you can be thinking about some of the elements of this form. Many of you have seen this before. It starts off at the top. There are several things that are really helpful. And the new form comes out in the fall every year, usually by September. And this is another thing I'll have to show you. On the conference website, there is a page for forms, and these get updated. Generally, September is when this form gets updated. But what Travis was talking about, the minimum compensation, you can see there at top left, there are two columns for minimum required cash salaries. The first column is there for ordained folks, deacons and elders, for associate ministers. Those are licensed local pastors who have taken the next step, become associate members, and for licensed local pastors who have completed their course of study. And so that'll be your minimum cash salary, and that's set fresh every year by annual conference. And so the updated number will be on this form in the fall every year. The second column is for licensed local pastors who are in process with their course of study. And that's their minimum cash salary. Now, I want to encourage you not to always stick to the minimum cash salary. We have some churches that just stay at that minimum cash salary all the time, and go up every year when that amount goes up. I encourage you to try to go a little higher if you can, but that's prorated for 3/4 time, half time, quarter time. And then also every year for full-time clergy, they're going to have that premium health flex credit. That number will change every year as well. So cash salary is one thing. If you have a parsonage, this would be the form that you would use. If you don't have a parsonage and you are providing additional cash salary for your pastor to be able to afford housing locally, make sure that this amount actually helps them afford local housing. That can be more or less expensive based on your context, what community you live in, but really important that we try to provide for them a parsonage standard amount to get them the kind of housing that they won't have to worry about on an ongoing basis. As you're down here, then expenses paid by the church for a parsonage is important. Make sure that you're covering, this these days, this includes TV, whether that's and their internet. It may just be internet, it may be cable, in your setting, but that's a part of it in addition to gas and electric and the other things. Accountable reimbursements, really important here. This is the way that your pastor is able to fund their continuing education, but also their professional commitments. And for our clergy, we expect them to be at annual conference. We expect them to come to the orders and fellowship gathering in the fall. Those things, it costs $1,000 often for your clergy to attend one of those events. And then you want to make sure that they're covered for mileage if they're going to be headed to hospitals at a distance. $3,000 is really kind of the minimum that you should ever have in this box. And if you pay attention to mileage and to those sorts of things, and to supporting that continuing education for your pastor, it's going to be more than that. But $3,000 should be the absolute bare minimum there. The other side of the column has to do with what they take out of their check to put in their pension, and what you are charged as a church for their pension and death and disability benefits over there. So those are just a few comments about that form. Anybody have any questions about compensation, that sort of thing? It's a big deal for you to work on every fall. All right. Good deal. Thank you. Okay, so fourth quarter. Let's look at what's going on in the fourth quarter. All right, so we're talking about October, November, December. This is where all that work on the compensation pays off for you all, because your yearly church conference is going to happen sometime in this quarter, more than likely. And you're going to want to make sure that all the questions are answered before you get there. Now, this is one of those deals people have told you before, if you're going into a meeting where there's going to be a vote, make sure that you know what the outcome of the vote's going to be before you go into the meeting. This is a prime example of that. You want to make sure all the money people have been taught to you all have done hard work on this. We're hoping every year that you can give a cost of living adjustment, for your pastor and for your other staff that you're working with, for those accompanists and office people, and look at that cost of living adjustment every year for them as your finance people are putting together their budget. Your pastor's compensation isn't the only one you're looking at everybody's, right? So make sure that you worked all that out before you go into your church conference, for sure, around your clergy compensation, but also as the budget's being set for the next year, you want to make sure that those things are incorporated in there. This is a great time. We do our clergy assessments in the spring, but in the fall, you can do a couple of things. One, revisit that assessment. It should be at least the chair of your SPRC who sits down with a pastor and looks over that assessment that was filled out in the spring, and say, all right, there are SMART goals at the end of that assessment. Look at those goals. What's going on by the time you get to October with those goals? Are they being addressed? Are they seeing progress? Has the situation changed so that one of those goals is no longer valid, needs to be changed in some way? But you really should not have that assessment that's done in the spring just go in a file and nobody looks at it again until the next spring when you got to fill out the next one. Address it in the fall. For both the SPRC and the pastor to be able to make that work for you. It doesn't need to be a dead document that just goes in a file. It needs to be useful for you as you go along. Now, for your other staff, there may be other standards. You want to pull out the job descriptions and sit down with your administrator or your musicians or your custodian and make sure that they remember what's in the job description, and so do you, and to have a good conversation with them. If you don't have a formal process or form or tool that you use for that, just should be a really holistic conversation that you have with them, and also incorporating the input from other folks who are involved with them. So like if you have a custodian, somebody who takes care of the building, make sure you've talked to the trustees, about what's going on with the building and what they need as far as expectations go. And this is another great time to work on building those relationships. Pastor Appreciation Month is October. I urge you all to put that on your calendar so that you can do something in October for your pastor, but they're not the only one you want to be doing something for. There is an Office Administrators Day every year. You want to make sure you know what that day is going to be in the upcoming year, so you can pay attention and get some flowers or a gift card or a card shower from the congregation for your office administrator, and same thing for your accompanists and your custodians. Make sure that there is some time during the year when you pay special attention to them and showing your gratitude for the hard work that they do for your church family. All right. Do it for that. Yeah, again, charge conference is going to be in the fall. You don't have an official report necessarily that you have to present, but that compensation package may require some explanation for folks who may have questions about it. So just make sure that the chair or someone from SPRC is present at that charge conference to answer those questions. All right. Before we get to talking about appointment stuff, are there any other questions about this time of year? All right. Well, we will jump on into this then. So, appointments. Obviously, this is a stressful time. Transitions with our clergy in our churches there's a stressful time. I don't know how many times, and there are some of you represented on this call, no doubt, who somebody recruited you to serve on the Staff Parish Relations Committee, saying this is really a pretty easy job. You don't have to do a whole lot with it. And then you got the call that said you're going to have a pastoral transition change, and you hold that person who recruited you responsible for years after that, for how that goes. So I want to go through that with you today. We've got a video. Jeff Rainwater was a district superintendent and then a conference superintendent, and he put together a great 6-minute video that talks about the appointment process. And so I'm going to show that to you, and then we will talk about it on the other side. Pull that up.
One of the Staff Parish Relations Committee's most important responsibilities is to engage with the bishop, cabinet, and pastors in the appointment process, whether there is an expected change in pastoral leaders or not. This is an annual process with its own flow and rhythm and moments for the committee to engage. The appointment process we use is unique to United Methodists. It is a consultative process between pastors, cabinet, and church for deploying pastoral leaders across 4 states among all of our churches. Per our covenant, the bishop and cabinet have the final authority to set an appointment, but every partner in the conversation has a part. The first step is a consultation by the pastor and committee through the annual appointment advisory form. Due December 1, this is the pastor's and committee's definitive moment to inform the cabinet of a potential need for an appointment change. Choices are to stay, to move, or either. We request that the church and pastor consult with each other on chosen options before sending in the forms to the district office. The appointment advisory form is only one step in a consultative process. The cabinet asks both the pastor and the committee to submit each year's updated profiles. While every conversation is a part of the consultation process, the cabinet uses these primary documents to understand pastors' and congregations' needs. The church profile is also a document that the cabinet shares with a prospective new pastor when offering a new appointment. So the profile must reflect the church and community as accurately as possible. Using the information reflected in these documents and all conversations with a church and pastor, the cabinet seeks to discern not just the best pastor for any given church, but how best to deploy all pastors to all our congregations. With 50 to 75 appointments a year, it gets complicated. Every move potentially opens up another appointment to be made. Let me put it this way. Imagine putting together a puzzle. While riding on a merry-go-round, your brother is pushing as fast as he can. And while you're doing that, your sister reaches over and grabs one of your pieces. In essence, the cabinet is making a new appointment for every church every year to either retain the pastor another year or to make a move. We consider the requests of pastors and churches, but requesting a change will not always guarantee a change will happen. There are many factors we must consider as a cabinet. Of course, requesting a pastor to stay does not always ensure the pastor will remain either. Almost every appointment involves this process be followed twice, for the outgoing pastor and then for the incoming pastor. When an appointment change is expected, the cabinet will almost always address the current pastor's appointment first, so that the pastoral leaders who wish to serve may have a place to do so. By discipline, our elders are guaranteed an appointment, so the cabinet is obligated to offer them a full-time appointment, if so chosen. Once the outgoing pastor's appointment has been set, the cabinet can begin filling the church's appointment. Once an appointment has been offered and accepted, the next step is the introduction, where a new pastor and committee meet for the first time. This is not a job interview. There is a favorable presumption that this is the first meeting of a pastor and a new church. However, the committee or pastor is allowed to raise concerns at the end of the introduction, requesting the bishop and cabinet reconsider the appointment. Upon a successful introduction, the appointment is announced and the transition begins. Until the appointment is announced, the new appointment is still confidential. After the appointment is announced, the committee begins the work of transition, including providing opportunities for goodbyes and preparing the church for welcoming a new pastor. As you have heard, this process is lengthy and involves a great many people. It usually takes months to complete. Patience, persistence, cooperation are all needed among all those involved. Trust is also required. In a moment, I will invite you to consider where God is at work in this process. What I want you to hear first, though, is that the cabinet approaches this process prayerfully. We pray over every appointment, every pastor, every church. We pray when we've made a decision and when we are stuck. As complicated as this process is for the entire conference, we know that this doesn't work without God. Not every appointment is perfect, or even what we would want, but we have seen God at work often.
Okay, so there's the basic process. I'll just point out a couple things that Jeff mentioned in there. One happens in this fourth quarter of the year, the appointment advisory form. Many of you have been involved with that. that and the clergy assessment in the spring are the 2 times a year when you have something to turn in that kind of forces you and the pastor to talk about how things are going. The appointment advisory forum, as Jeff said, has 3 options: stay, move, or either. And really, in our system, going all the way back to John Wesley, every one of our appointments is for 1 year at a time. They're read at annual conference in June, and it starts in July 1 and it goes to June 30th the next year. But this is an opportunity for churches and pastors to weigh in ahead of the appointment season, which really kind of begins in earnest in late January. So that's an important point. Another thing I want to lift up for you, one of the forms that is listed in the packet of annual forms that every church turns in is that church profile. And it is the most helpful if you help your church to get that filled out every year and updated every year, so that it's not a surprise when the time comes around to have that done. We'd love for you to keep that updated, and it's easier to keep it updated than to have to craft it from scratch. So, all right. What questions, comments, concerns do you have to lift up related to that appointment process? There is obviously more to it, but that was the outline. Most of you have been through it before, so. While you're thinking about questions, I will share a little more about how the calendar kind of unfolds with that process. So we get those advisory forms in December every year. Either at the end of the year in December or the beginning of the year in January, the cabinet gets together in person. We meet online every week, but about at this point, 4 or 5 times a year we get together in person, and one of those is our audit. And every year, and this year it was in January, we get together for 5 days because it takes a while, and each superintendent goes through every church in their district. So we have 318 churches now. We went through every one of the 318 churches and heard a report about how things were going, what was happening with the pastor there, what the church has been doing, so that each and every one of us superintendents becomes at least a little bit familiar with every church, because we are all responsible for all of the pastors who serve all of our churches. And so it's important for us to know what's going on in other places, because when we have our conversations about clergy and where they would best serve with their gifts and graces, it's not always in our district, right? You all know we've had pastors come into your district from outside the district and even outside the conference, and so it's important that everybody on the cabinet has a way to be familiar with every place in our conference. It's important for me to hear from the Montana district superintendents, because I don't know Montana really well, apart from how they represent it to me. So that's always really helpful in that process. So there we go. Any comments, questions? You all either know it all already, or are shy, or tired.
It's a good question in the chat, Chris.
Oh yeah, there we go. Let's see. Sorry, I got to roll down. What is the church profile? All right. One thing I'm going to show to you all real quick. Is how to get to the forms on our website, because you can find all kinds of interesting things there. So, and then I'll show you the profile. So, okay, so here is our Mountain Sky website. And when you go to the website, over on the tab on the right side, it says Forms and Resources. And the first item on there is Forms Home. And if you click on that, you get the forms page that has tons of stuff here. This is a lot of stuff for people who are in candidacy, who want to go into ministry, either certified lay ministries, or as deacons, or as elders, or as licensed local pastors. All those forms are there. But if you go down to local church forms, you're going to find all kinds of stuff here. Charge conference, click on that list, and you have a whole list of things there. The compensation form is on that list. See if I don't think the profile is going to be on that list. I think it's going to be on the year-end reporting list. See that one there either. Okay, so we'll get it for you. Oh, there we go. It's under local church SPRC. That's your tab. Church and pastoral profile is in the middle of that list, and you can download that. The profile form, get off of there. So the church profile form asks you a lot of questions about your community that you live in, do ministry in, and also about your church family and about what you're looking for in the pastoral leadership for your church. It asks for some numbers. You know, what's your budget been the last couple of years? What your membership and attendance, and what are the economic drivers in your community? Do you have a mission vision statement? Those kind of questions are part of that profile. So it's available there for you, Sherry, if you want to download that and just take a look at what's in it. How many years do pastors typically serve at a church? That's a great question. I think the average in our conference actually went down slightly, but it's been in the neighborhood of 4 years. That, of course, means there are some that don't go 4 years, and there are some that you look around. We've got some pastors who have served for a very long time where they are. This goes into what Jeff was talking about in the video, that the bishop and cabinet have to look at all of those 318 churches. And there are particular things that are going on in your church and in every church, but we're also looking at that big picture. And so sometimes it makes total sense for a pastor to stay where they are for 4, 5, 6, 10 years. Sometimes both the church and the pastor ask for a move, or either the church or the pastor ask for a change. And so that can result in a shorter tenure somewhere. So 4 years is an average, but it's going to be more and less depending on what's going on in a particular place, and sometimes what's going on in another place. There may be another place where the gifts and graces of a particular pastor need to be deployed because it's crucial to that place that happens. So let's see, next question. How much authority does the SPR have? How can they put teeth to their recommendations, such as parsonage and housing issues, reimbursement issues, difficult relationships with church leaders? Well, the only place that we have teeth in any function of our church, whether it's SPRC or finance or trustees or nominations, are the places where we have something in the book of discipline that mandates how we operate, right? So that's always the first place to look if you're concerned about what the disciplinary standards are for a particular situation. Parsonage housing issue. Okay, so I'm just gonna throw an example out here, because this happens, in a church that has a parsonage, and the pastor has a concern about something in the parsonage. Maybe there's a safety concern, something that the pastor is concerned about that way, or something that is just super inconvenient. It's going on in the parsonage. SPRC is always the first place that the pastor can go to share that, and that's one of the ways that the SPRC supports a pastor is to pay attention to the parsonage and to their housing standards and that sort of thing, and can then be an advocate with the trustees, with the church council, to make changes that need to be made, improvements that need to be made. Every year, it's mandated that the SPRC chair and a trustee and take a tour through a parsonage to make sure that it is a safe and comfortable place for the pastor to live, and B, that the pastor is taking care of this house that belongs to the church. And so that's an important thing to happen every year there. Anything around reimbursement questions? There are two other documents. This is important for you to know too. There are two other documents that you should get approved at your charge conference every year. If not by your charge conference, by your church council. One is a housing form that if your pastor were ever audited, they would need to have that document in order to prove to the IRS that they have housing either in the form of a parsonage or in the form of a housing allowance from your church. So that housing form is important to fill out. The other one is an accountable reimbursement policy that the church and the pastor sign every year. And that's where you can specify the ways that those reimbursement dollars are dispersed to the pastor and what the standards are. Just an example that the pastor needs to turn in receipts within 60 days to the person who writes the checks. That's an example of something that could be in your reimbursement policy. But we've got those. We've got sample ones for you to use, and then to tweak based on your individual context of your church. Difficult relationships with church leaders, that's a great way for your SPRC to help out your pastor. One of the things that we mentioned earlier was it's important for you all to have good relationships with the movers and shakers in your congregation, so that you can be that mediating presence sometimes between your pastor and someone else in the church. For you to maintain all those relationships is really, really important, so that you can be that presence. And it goes both ways, right? There may be a church member who has a problem with your pastor, and it may be your pastor who is not handled a relationship well with somebody in the church, right? So for you to be able to step in there and be someone who can communicate and make sure they can communicate with each other, and sometimes it requires some reconciliation and conflict resolution. If you have situations that are over your head that you're not sure how to deal with, that's when you can call the superintendent or your congregational resource minister, and we can help. First, we're going to want you all to deal with it yourselves, and so first we're going to want to help you talk through it. We're going to be sounding board and help you talk through how you can manage it. We don't want to. Some of you know systems theory. We don't want to create a triangle. We're not going to become the middle person unless things have really gone south. But we'll help you try to figure it out first before we get personally involved in it, because that's super important for you all to be able to do. But we want to help with that. All right, Lynn, does that give some? Okay, great. Teresa asked us, is there a place to find the results of a pastor evaluation? Teresa, let's see. Let me see if I can see you. Yes, there you are. Talking about that springtime assessment that we do. Just nod your head if that's right, or shake it if, yeah, okay. Yeah, so that should be in your files. Every year when you do it, it should go in your files so that SPRC can look back at previous years. One of the things we ask in that form, at the current format of it, there are number rankings and comments, and I like the number rankings. It's a Likert scale, 1 to 5 kind of thing, because you can quantify that year to year, and preaching and teaching, for example. If there was a 3 several years ago, and over the last few years, through consultation with you and the pastor, they've improved to a 4.5, or whatever that may look like. But yeah, that should be in your files every year. Keep track of those every year. Will this recording be available to us? Yes, Rob, it will be available. We'll get this out to you. Well, I'll send the link to all the clergy and the SPR contact people that we have. So we'll get that to you the next day or two. All right. And one thing we're gonna is we have our district gathering coming up on March 2nd, which I encourage all of you to attend, either in person or online. Registration is available on the Facebook page, and we've sent that out to your churches as well. So ask your pastor or lay leaders or secretary if they've got that registration link if you want to sign up. But we are gonna, Travis, you don't know this yet either, but we're gonna use that as our opportunity to get our district YouTube page up and going. So the videos that we end up with from workshops and from worship at the district gathering, along with this video, we'll have things available on the district YouTube page for folks to access later on. So, all right. Wow. Okay. We're at an hour and a half. Anybody have anything burning on your heart or mind that we need to address before we call it a night here? All right. Well, if questions come up, please don't hesitate to be in touch with us. Me or Travis, either one. We would love to talk through it with you. We've both got years of experience in this work. You can also, and I'm just, because we're looking at all these people who are so experienced with this work in the life of our churches, you can always call an SPRC person from the church down the road, somebody who you know has been doing this work for a while, or somebody who you've met and you respect and would love to get their input and feedback. Always respecting the confidentiality piece, right? You don't ever want to disclose things that are going on within your SPRC and with your pastor if they are personal things. But if you have general questions and there's someone on the screen or in your area that you think you would like to ask, please feel free to ask those questions, folks who've been doing this for a while. All right. Well, we'll be, like I said before, we'll be sending out the dates for the next couple of trainings here pretty soon. We'll get those out to the folks that they're targeted at for sure. But we're overjoyed that we had this group show up to be with us here tonight. Travis, you have any last words before Travis, I'll have you say a closing prayer for us, but do you have anything that has come to you as I've been blabbing along?
No, I think one of the things I had shared this week with our young people at the confirmation retreat is how important the work of discernment is, of taking time to pray, to be in consultation with each other of matters that are important. And I feel SPRC is a committee that really embraces that spiritual need and gift. So I would encourage you in discernment, not in a negative way, but rather to see where the Holy Spirit is leading the ministry of your church. Where is the Holy Spirit leading your church to connect with its community, to connect with others, to share the good news of Jesus, because that's what we're about. We want to bring hope and light into our communities, and we pray to God that all of our work works to those ends. So that's all I wanted to the end.
That brings us around full circle back to what I started with, right? In order for you to be faithful and effective leaders in your church, you need to pay attention to your spiritual journey, so that you bring to this work not just technical knowledge, but spiritual depth. And that really has to be at the core of the work that you do in the life of your church. So thank you all for doing that work and for being here tonight. Travis?
All right. Well, let us pray. Gracious God, I give thanks for each and every person who has given up time in their evening to be a part of this time to learn and to grow, and ultimately to support the work of your church wherever we find ourselves Lord, we're thankful for all the ways in which we can reach out to connect with others, to share your hope and your light. Lord, we ask that your wisdom and guidance be in all that we do, that all that we do glorifies you and does share that light that is so desperately needed in our world. Lord, be with us as we go our separate ways. We pray all this in your Son's holy name. Amen.
And very good. Now, if you're up for it, if you would unmute and just say goodnight to everybody so folks can hear your voice before we get done here, that'd be great.
Bye, goodbye.
Good night. Good
Night,
night.
everybody.
Hey.
Have a
Hey.
good night, everybody.
Hi, Libby.
Night.
Good night, all.
Night.
Okay.